Picture this: Rome, the magnificent capital of the ancient world, a city of marble and monuments. But on the night of July 18th, 64 AD, this splendor turned into a living nightmare. A fire broke out, a small spark in the bustling shops near the Circus Maximus, and it grew into an inferno that would rage for 6 days and 7 nights. When the smoke finally cleared, two-thirds of Rome lay in ashes. For centuries, one name has been synonymous with this catastrophe: Emperor Nero. The image is iconic: Nero, fiddling on his palace rooftop while his city burned to the ground. But is that what really happened? Was Nero a pyromaniac tyrant who sacrificed his own people for a twisted artistic vision? Or is he one of history's most misunderstood figures? Today, we're going to sift through the ashes of history, separate fact from fiction, and uncover the truth behind the Great Fire of Rome. Let's start with the popular story, the one we've all heard. The Roman historian Tacitus, who was a child when the fire happened, gives us one of the most detailed accounts. He tells us a rumor spread like wildfire, no pun intended, that Nero himself had ordered the city to be burned. Why? Well, the story goes that he wanted to clear land to build his extravagant new palace, the Domus Aurea, or the Golden House. It was said he watched the blaze from the Tower of Maecenas, completely captivated by the beauty of the flames, and even sang a song about the fall of Troy, accompanying himself on his lyre. It's a powerful image, a perfect symbol of a decadent and cruel ruler utterly detached from the suffering of his people. This version of events was further solidified by later historians like Suetonius and Cassius Dio, who painted Nero as an absolute monster. According to them, Nero wasn't just a spectator. He was the director of the destruction. It's a compelling narrative, right? A mad emperor destroying his own city for a vanity project. But when we look closer, the story starts to fall apart. First, that famous detail about the fiddle. The fiddle didn't even exist in ancient Rome. It wouldn't be invented for another 1,000 years. The original accounts mention a lyre, which was a common instrument. But even the lyre story is questionable. Tacitus himself, our best source, presents it as a rumor, not as a confirmed fact. He makes it clear that accounts were contradictory. So where was Nero when the fire started? He wasn't even in Rome. He was at his villa in the seaside resort of Antium, about 35 miles away. When he heard the news, he rushed back to the city. And what did he do when he got there? Did he grab his lyre and start composing? No. According to that same historian, Tacitus, Nero immediately took charge of the relief efforts. He opened his private gardens and public buildings like the Pantheon to shelter the homeless. He arranged for food supplies to be brought in from surrounding towns and sold grain at a drastically reduced price to prevent starvation. These are not the actions of a man who wanted his city to burn. He was actively trying to save it and help its people. So if Nero didn't start the fire, who did? The most likely answer is nobody. Or rather, it was an accident waiting to happen. First-century Rome was a tinderbox. The majority of the city was a chaotic maze of narrow, winding streets packed with wooden, multi-story apartment buildings called insulae. These were poorly constructed and crammed with people. Cooking was done on open fires, and lighting came from oil lamps. Think about it. Thousands of open flames in a city built largely of wood. Fires were incredibly common in ancient Rome. The Great Fire of 64 AD was just that, a great fire, bigger and more destructive than most, but probably accidental. The fire started in the merchant area around the Circus Maximus, which was full of flammable goods like oil and textiles. A strong summer wind fanned the flames, and once it started, it was nearly impossible to stop. So why did the story of Nero the arsonist stick so well? We have to understand Nero's reputation. Even before the fire, he wasn't popular with everyone, especially the old money senatorial class. They saw him as a populist performer who cared more about singing, acting, and chariot racing than about traditional Roman virtues. They despised his public performances, considering them beneath the dignity of an emperor. These senators were also the ones writing the history books. Historians like Tacitus and Suetonius were part of this aristocratic elite, and they had every reason to portray Nero in the worst possible light. They wrote their accounts decades after Nero's death, during the reigns of new dynasties that wanted to legitimize their own power by demonizing the last of the Julio-Claudian line. A story about a crazy, fire-starting emperor was the ultimate political smear campaign. But Nero knew he was in trouble. The people of Rome were devastated, homeless, and looking for someone to blame. An accidental fire wasn't a satisfying answer. They needed a scapegoat, and Nero gave them one. He turned the blame onto a small, misunderstood religious sect that was gaining a foothold in the city, the Christians. At this point, Christians were a fringe group, and their beliefs were viewed with suspicion by many Romans. They were accused of all sorts of strange things. Nero launched the first ever state-sponsored persecution of Christians. According to Tacitus, they were arrested, and their punishment was made into a spectacle. They were torn apart by dogs, crucified, or coated in flammable materials and set alight to serve as human torches in Nero's gardens. It was a horrific and brutal act, and it's a dark stain on Nero's legacy that is absolutely true. He used a vulnerable minority to deflect blame from himself. Now, what about that golden house, the Domus Aurea? It's true that after the fire, Nero did use a large portion of the cleared land to build his magnificent new palace complex. This was terrible PR, to say the least. While his people were still suffering, he was building a monument to himself. The Domus Aurea was incredibly opulent, with gold-leafed walls, a revolving dining room, and even an artificial lake. This certainly fueled the rumors that he had burned the city down just to make room for it. It seemed to confirm everyone's worst suspicions. However, it is important to note that Nero's new city plan for the rest of Rome was actually a huge improvement. He mandated wider streets, the use of stone and brick instead of wood, and access to a reliable water supply for firefighting. He essentially tried to fireproof Rome, implementing building codes that would make the city safer for everyone. So, when we put it all together, what do we have? We have an emperor who was likely not in the city when the fire began, who rushed back to lead relief efforts, and who implemented forward-thinking urban planning to prevent future disasters. But we also have an emperor who used the disaster as an opportunity to build a lavish palace and who brutally scapegoated a religious minority to save his own skin. The truth about Nero and the Great Fire of Rome is far more complex than the simple tale of a madman with a fiddle. He wasn't the monster his political enemies made him out to be, but he was no saint either. He was a flawed, complex ruler caught in a catastrophic event, and his actions, both good and bad, have echoed through history for 2,000 years. The story of Nero fiddling while Rome burned is a powerful myth, but it's a reminder that history is often written by the winners, and the truth is usually buried somewhere in the ashes. What do you think? Was Nero a victim of bad press, or a cunning tyrant who got away with it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey into the past, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our next video. See you next time.